Blog Talk Radio.
I believe I did that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to 720 Degree Tennis. And I'm your host, Bill Patton. And you have probably already heard that I'm a little wound up and excited about today's show. We're going to have Lisa Stone on from ParentingAces, and she's a blogger and a super tennis mom and a volunteer for various events, and extremely influential in the area of thinking about how to be a great tennis parent. And one thing I like about Lisa is she's always looking for more information, always looking to help someone get connected to the best practices. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. My goal for this show is that, coaches or parents or even players who are listening to this, you're going to get some stuff that will help you, save you some time, save you some headaches and trouble in your life. So let's welcome Lisa on the show. How are you doing today, Lisa? Wait a second. I better unmute the mic. All right. Wow, we're off to a choppy start here. How are you, Lisa?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Bill.
It's a pleasure. And, the other day you had me on your show, and so I hope people will listen to that. That was a lot of fun. I felt I was very happy about the way that turned out, so I hope you were too.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about you and your tennis, and how did you get into the game, because that's where we always start on this show.
Well, I am from a tennis family. My dad grew up playing in New Orleans and went all through the juniors, ended up at Tulane, where he was on a national championship team. And at almost 77 years old, he still plays twice a week with one of his Tulane teammates who actually he came up through the juniors with. So these two guys have been playing tennis against each other since they were about 10 years old, and they still play singles, which is unbelievable. They're so much fun to watch, and they trash talk each other and goad each other on the court. It's awesome. My youngest brother, played for Wash U as a walk-on and had a great tennis career there and still plays very competitively. And I was kind of the weak link. I wasn't very good, but I loved the social aspect and I loved the cute outfits. And I am still tight with several of the people that I came up with through the juniors who wound up going a lot further than I did. I actually quit competing after my freshman year in high school. I played 1 year of high school tennis, and then that was that. And came back to the game.
Racket?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever have a pink racket?
No, but I had a Chrissy Evert autograph.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
which is hanging on my wall.
And have you ever selected strings based on color?
Yes.
Okay, there we have it. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. No, I'm coaching high school girls tennis. It's like, hey, coach, can you put the purple strings in my racket?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
You're that girl.
I was
awesome.
that girl. Not anymore. Well, a little bit. But now I play on several different teams. I live in the Atlanta area, and league tennis is huge here. And so I play out of my neighborhood. I play out of one of the local clubs, and just absolutely love the sport. So, and out of my three kids, only one got the bug. So, it's my last one, and he's a senior in high school now, and so it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, my son got the bug. My daughter got dragged along, and then she eventually was absolved of responsibility as well. So let's talk about ParentingAces. How did you get started with that?
Well, ever since my son decided that he wanted to start competing in tennis, and I should back up and say he started taking lessons at our neighborhood courts when he was about 5 years old. We have a several teaching pros that come into the neighborhood and teach kids and teach adults. And so he was taking one 30-minute private lesson a week, and just as part of his after-school activities, he also played baseball and he played soccer. So this was just one of those things he did. And the summer that he was 9 years old, he got invited by one of his good buddies to join him at the University of Georgia tennis camp for a week and to room together there. And once he got back from that tennis camp, he had decided that tennis was his sport, and he wanted to start playing tournaments and, really strive toward playing college tennis. And I had no clue.
So how old was he at that time?
He was 9.
And 9 years old and made up his mind that he was going to play college tennis. That's nice.
Yeah, well, you go to UGA for a week and you get to stand across the net from John Isner and try to return his serve. That lights a fire in a lot of kids. So he came home with a belly full of burning fire for tennis. We're Georgia fans living in Atlanta, so that was a big spark for him. And given how many years it had been since I had played junior tennis, I really had no clue where to start with him. And of course, the first person I talked to was the coach that was teaching him his 30-minute lesson every week, who thankfully was very straight up and honest with me and said, "Lisa, I don't have a clue how the tournament structure works, and if that's what he wants to do, you probably need to look for a more intense environment for him where he's going to get the proper training and guidance through the process." So I started asking around and looking for information. I had a very difficult time getting the information I wanted, and I reached out to USTA and went on their website, and anybody that's gone to the USTA website understands that it's very complicated to find what you need there, and the information is not obvious. It doesn't just jump out at you as a parent. So I continued to ask questions of everybody I came in contact with and started to get a little bit of guidance, but as we discuss this further today, it will become very clear that I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And about 3.5 years ago or so, I stumbled on a Facebook group called U.S. Junior Legends. And why they allowed me to join the group is beyond me, because I certainly was never a U.S. Junior Legend, but they welcomed me, and not only welcomed me, but allowed me the freedom to ask my questions, and then responded to my questions with really helpful information, and questions on things like coaching, on off-court training, mental toughness, nutrition, how to navigate the tournament structure, and all these things. And as I continued to ask questions, members of that group encouraged me to start a website and put all of the information I was gathering in one place for other parents to use too. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me. ParentingAces was born 3 years ago in November, and it's just been unbelievable what's happened in that 3-year period.
Okay, and so that's some great background. I hadn't heard that full story before. And now, wasn't there? I think you told me before that there was a woman who had been doing something similar that had also inspired you.
Yes, there was another blog out there called The Tennis Mom, and Nicole, the writer of the blog, lives in Canada, and her daughter plays competitive tennis. Her daughter, I think, is a year or two younger than my son, if I'm not mistaken. And Nicole's husband is actually a high-performance coach. He's from Germany. They live in Canada now, but he's trained with Steve Smith and has extensive amounts of knowledge. And so Nicole would share that information. Well, all of a sudden she stopped writing, and so I tend to have these slightly stalker-esque tendencies from time to time. And so I went online and tried to find her so that I could contact her and say, where'd you go? I need you. Don't go away. I need you to keep publishing this information. And she responded to me and said, I can't do it anymore. My full-time job is, taking up more and more of my time. I just don't have the time to write. But feel free to take over if you want. And so that was kind of the last little kick in the pants that I needed to actually get online and, create the website and start writing.
Yeah, and that's great. And thank goodness for Lisa the psychopath, I mean, sociopathic Lisa. And, then that's kind of like a good Goron, bad Goron, crazy Goron kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, and hey, that's terrific that you took that mantle on because if there's you out there and you're the stalker, then there are probably 10,000 other people who are feeling badly, but they're not going to pursue it. So you created a bridge in that way. So now let's go on to kind of the lessons learned. All right. What are I put down 3 because and we could have more, but what are 3 things that you know now that you wish you'd known at the beginning? In terms of the junior tennis piece, and maybe the how to get the word out to parents or whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I mean, in terms of navigating junior tennis, I think one thing that I have learned is the questions to ask a potential coach, so that you make sure that you're choosing the right coaching environment for your child. And, my son's gone through a couple different transitions over the years, and they've all been good transitions, and I don't feel like we've wasted any time. I wouldn't say we were ever with a bad coach, but I do feel like I've gotten better at understanding the limitations of a coach and what questions I need to ask as a parent in terms of, not just their tennis knowledge, but also their personal philosophy on things. So that's one thing.
So how do the questions change over time? Because, you're going to ask different questions when your son's age 9 than you are when he's 13 than you are when he's 17, right?
Yes, for sure.
So give us some great questions to ask for, at the beginning when you're just getting started.
Well, I think given the 10 and under initiative that USTA has taken on, I think it's important to ask a potential coach what their philosophy is around 10 and under tennis with the red, orange, green balls. Do they use that as a training tool? Do they adhere to the age restrictions on it, or do they look at the individual child and make adjustments based on the child's ability in terms of progressing through the red, orange, green to the yellow ball? And how do they recommend you handle competition while your child is under that red, orange, green restriction? So that's a question.
Those are great questions.
Okay, yeah. So that's the beginning thing, because you want to make sure your child's getting a solid foundation, and you also want to make sure that you and the coach are in agreement over how they're going to be progressing. So I think that's important. I also
Let me jump in there for a second, because I want to be hired as your coach. So I'm going to give you my answer to that question.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, because we're on my show today. We're doing it my way.
Absolutely.
You got to do it your way the other day, right, which was mostly me talking. So it's a win-win for me. But anyway, okay, joking aside. No, you know what's funny is that I've been using transition balls since 1999. You know, and they had only been out in the States for a couple of years, and I felt like an early adopter. And over time, you said it exactly right. They're teaching tools. You know, it's something that you use to support kids who might be struggling a little bit with their technique, and nothing more. I mean, my philosophy on that is you should play red ball until you can compete and maintain your stroke integrity, and then you should move to orange ball, and if your stroke technique breaks down, then you need to dwell there and learn to hit the orange ball well, and then when you can compete well and your technique maintains integrity, then you can move on to green ball and so on. And I think kids, you know, it used to be called quick start because kids used to matriculate very quickly through all of that. But right. then I guess they didn't want to use quick start because they wanted it to go more slowly. And, you know, and then they started saying things like, it's not a race to yellow. And I happen to disagree with the it's not a race to yellow idea. On the other hand, you might see some kids who go out there and they're not ready to play yellow ball, but they're trying, and they're determined in their mind that they will become a yellow ball player, but all that's really happening is that they're developing horrible habits of technique for the sake of trying to win 1 point in tennis. So, you know, there's kind of a balance there. So anyway,
sure.
I think that's the longest answer I'm going to give to any of your questions. But so that's your 9-year-old question. Are the
that's
any
one
other
of
questions?
them. I have another 9-year-old question.
Okay, good.
I want to know, and I wish I had known to ask this. I wish. I want to know if the coach is going to focus on results or if he or she is going to focus on process. And that's a huge, huge question. And I, as a parent, didn't have the knowledge to ask that question. All I knew was if my kid's winning, that must mean he's getting better. And that is such the wrong approach. So I wish I had asked that question. And then the last 9-year-old question.
Let's go a little deeper into that question, though. All right.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I mean, okay, this is I'm not going to hold you to it, and there'll be no lawsuits or anything. But if you had to put a percentage on it, if you had to guess, what percentage of coaches are having kind of a very much a results-oriented mindset versus a process-oriented mindset, what percentage would you guess that is?
I would guess that because I know now how many coaches out there are mediocre, I would say there are a majority of them that are outcome-oriented, results-oriented.
Okay. 75% higher or lower?
Probably a little higher.
Okay, what's the number?
Let's say 80%. 80%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And you know, isn't it funny that it kind of obeys the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you'll find that in schools too, that 20% of the teachers in schools are awesome. That's my take. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
20% are awesome. 60 love their subject, but they don't like kids, and 20% couldn't find another job.
Right.
So,
I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Now, should we go to another age group, or do you have your third 9-year-old question?
I want to tell you my third and last question because this one's really important also. I want to know how the coach is going to communicate with me and how often they're going to communicate with me. Because that's one of my biggest issues with junior coaches right now is the lack of communication.
Yeah, and you do love to talk, Lisa. You know,
I do,
and that's good. I mean, you care and you're really involved, and sadly, I think a lot of coaches sort of bristle against that, which is ill-advised because you want to develop that three-way communication pyramid, and so why exclude the parent? I don't understand that. So a best practice for any coach then would be to know whether or not you are giving enough communication to the parents. Because if you don't know if you are, then you probably aren't. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. And I the big thing for me is just tell me what the expectation is. If you tell me what to expect, then I can make an educated decision on whether or not you're the right coach for my kid. But if you don't tell me, then I'm left guessing, and that doesn't serve any of us well.
Mhm. Okay, next age group, 12, 13, 8th grade. You got to love those kids. 8th grade.
God, ooh. Brutal. Yeah. Brutal age. It is. It's a brutal age for so many reasons. I mean, the kids are going through, physical changes, emotional changes. They're having social pressures for probably the first time, and it's brutal. So at that point, I would say that a really good question, and if you haven't asked this earlier, is I want to know how you, the coach, are going to work with my player and me as the parent to structure a training and competition schedule that makes sense. That's based on my kid's level. That's based on the goals that my kid has shared with you. That's based on our financial situation. That's based on our time limitations, whether we have other kids at home that we have to maneuver. And so I want to know what you're going to do as the coach, what your role is going to be, and what you expect my role to be in that.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
And there's a incredibly wide range of answers that can come out of that.
Sure.
I'd like to share a best practice. Dr. Bob Love came out and was speaking to 150 tennis pros at Stanford University, and he asked everyone in the room to raise your hand if you're a coach. And so everybody put their hand up. And then he asked, how many of you have seen your player play a tournament match in the last month? Keep your hand up.
How many stayed
and then
up?
A few people, less than 20% had. He said, "No, you are the coaches. The rest of you just teach tennis."
Right.
So I think part of what also goes into that is that coaches shouldn't just be teaching; they should also be watching and seeing what the product is.
Well, that's one of my issues is, okay, you're not coming, coach, I'm speaking to you. You're not coming to see my child compete. I'm the one that's sitting there. But if you're not communicating with me in terms of what you've been working on with my child, what directives you've given my child to do during tournament competition, for example, if you've told him once he's won the first set by 6-2 or easier, then he's supposed to serve and volley through the entire second set, and if he gets down, maybe change a tactic. But you know what I'm saying. So I want to know specifically what you're working on and what the expectations are so that I have something objective to look at while my child is competing and can report back to you from an objective standpoint what's going on the court. But if you don't share that with me and you're not there to see it, how can you help my kid continue to get better?
That's a great point, and I think that there is there is a segment of tennis coaches that don't believe that parents can be rational.
Well, we can't a lot of the times. I mean, they're totally justified in that opinion, because when it's your flesh and blood out there competing, a lot of the time it is difficult to be rational. But if you, the coach, give me something concrete to focus on, I'm more likely to stay rational for a longer period of time.
Yeah. No, that's great. That is really awesome, because then it's really about giving you something to latch onto, to look for, and to think about, and then it's like your compass pointing to true north. You know, it gives you something to be directed towards. So that's a great advice. Okay, so anything else from kind of that middle school age group?
I want to know, too, at that point, what the game plan is moving into high school, if college tennis is my child's goal. I want to know that the coach has thought about it and, you know, has looked at my specific child's situation, his growth, his development in the game, but also his development in terms of his maturity, and I want to know what the game plan is moving forward. So at the end of middle school, I think it's really important that the coach, the parent, and the child are on the same page about what the goal is and what you're going to do to get there. And I will say that, you know, for boys, they're still growing physically at this age. For girls, they may be nearing the end of their growth. You know, they may be done by age 13, 14. So that it takes a different attitude, you know, with a boy than with a girl. So, for example, in terms of off-court training, you know, a girl may be fully developed and may be able to accelerate the type of off-court fitness training she's doing by 8th grade. But for a boy, he's still growing. The bones and muscles and ligaments are still developing. And so a different approach has to be taken with a boy who's still growing and developing physically.
Yeah. And so I think the point I'm getting from that is that you want to know that it's developmentally appropriate. And I see a lot of stuff going on that's not developmentally appropriate, and then you end up with broken kids. You end up with kids who have cracks in their spine, and you have kids who have shoulder girdles that are pretty much wrecked, and knee problems, and just all sorts of things from misguided adult-level training applied to children.
Right. And this goes to equipment choice, too. The type of racket the child's using, the type of string, the string tension, the grip size. You know, if you, the coach, don't have a knowledge of that stuff, then do your research and talk to somebody and guide me as the parent. That's not... I feel like that should be under the purview of the coach. The coach should make the recommendation in terms of, you know, which particular racket a child should be using, the weight of the racket, the string pattern, the string tension, the type of string, because a lot of the injuries we're seeing are equipment related. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think we want to go too deeply into that, but I get your point. Let's stay at that level. I wanted to mention that I'm actually finishing up a book right now that'll be uploaded tonight, believe it or not, and it's called Top 5 Mental and Emotional Foundations for Winning Tennis. And it runs along what you're saying right here, and part of it has to do with the longer term planning, you know, and with younger kids, you might want to have a 1-year plan. You know, what's the 1-year plan? And then as kids become more, you know, either older or more ambitious, then you could have a 3 to 5 year plan of okay, you're going to play 6 tournaments this year, you know, 9 the next year, and then 12 after that. and we're going to be focusing. These will be the objectives to build into your game over a period of time.
Right.
You know, speaking as a coach, I mean, I try to be very, very detailed with my parents to some extent, but the part of the danger is that if you start sharing too much of a plan with everyone, then there's this false sense of accountability that comes into it, and then people say, hey, you know, you're deviating from the plan. You said you were going to do this, and it's like, well, you know, look at where we are. I mean, we had. If I share my plan, then if I change it, then people are going to call me on it, and that's a lot of spinning of wheels. I don't want to go through that.
Well, but that gets back to the communication piece. If you're doing a good job communicating with me as the parent, and you say to me, you know, here's the plan as of today, we may need to revisit this in a month or 6 weeks or 3 months because your child may advance quicker or may not be as advancing as quickly as we hoped, and so we'll make adjustments. But this is the big picture, and then we'll go in and tweak the details as we go. And I would be okay with that if you tell me. I just want to know, as the parent, I want to know that you, the coach, have thought about my child, my child's development, my child's strengths and weaknesses, and that you've come up with something that is specific to him that's going to help him attain the goals that he has set for himself.
Oh, and that's so great. And that also defeats the cookie cutter approach that is so prevalent that I really despise. So Here, let me throw something at you. Every tennis coach who's listening, most every tennis coach will relate to this phone call. So you get this on your message machine. Hello, coach. I would like you to train my player to be a professional tennis player. We would like to start a lesson next week. Right?
Right.
And so I get these phone calls, right? And lots of people get these phone calls. Turn my kid into a pro. So here's what I did. I learned how to say, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, okay, well, yeah, I'll see you Saturday. We'll check this kid out. You know, and here's my first thing I do with that kid. I go to them and I go, so, hey, you want to be a pro tennis player? And you can tell instantly whether it's coming from the kid or not.
Sure.
You know, and I very few kids have ever agreed with that as a goal, you know, but I had one girl and she nodded vigorously. And then she didn't have anything approaching the talent that was going to take her there. Mm-hmm. But we adjusted our goal. Here's another one. 11-year-old kid comes to me and she says, I want to become a Division I college tennis player. I was like, oh, okay. Well, then here's what you're going to have to do. It's probably going to take 5,000 hours of training and playing between now and the time you're 16. Because if it takes 10,000 hours to be world class, then it's got to take at least 5,000 hours to become Division I. So, and then we began measuring it, and we realized, okay, she's not coming anywhere close to meeting these time requirements. And the pressure began to build on her. And then finally I was like, hey, it looks like you're not making it. And she said, yeah, I don't think so. So let's readjust your goal, honey. You know, what do you want to do now? Right. So then the cool thing was, between her and her parents and I, then she readjusted and said she wanted to be the number one player on her high school team.
Great goal.
So,
Great
goal. Is that kind of an answer? So that's an example of what you're saying is kind of suiting it to the kid. I mean, once we become anything other than centered on the player, then we're off track. So, Okay, let me get back to my questions here. So let's move on to kind of that 16, 17, or do you think it's a different age that there needs to be a shift?
I think once they're in high school.
Okay, so they're in high school, and then how do the questions change?
Well, now it becomes truly focused around the kid. And the parent, it's time for the parent to take a giant step backwards at this point. The kid needs to be taking ownership of his or her tennis by 9th grade. And this is, to me, one of the truest, purest, best gifts that tennis offers is that sense of this is my thing, and if I want to put the work in, if I want to make the effort, then I'm going to get where I want to go. But if I don't want to do those things, the responsibility falls solely on my shoulders, and the consequences are solely mine to bear.
Yeah, and you have to transition towards that. What does that transition look like? What are some of the things that you, as a parent, require your kid to do to take ownership of their own stuff before they hit high school?
Well, this is one of those lessons learned things. I'm going to tell you what I wish I had done, okay?
Okay.
Not what I did, because what I did,
okay.
Yeah. So I've learned. Okay, so I mean, some of this I did. I think from day one, the kid needs to be responsible for making sure he has everything he needs when he's going to train or when he's going to compete. So, you know, when they're beginners, they need to make sure they have their shoes, their socks, the right, you know, clothing, something to drink, that the racket has strings intact and a grip that's intact. And I think that needs to start from the get-go. And, you know, again, it's one of those things, of course, the very first time they go, they're not going to have any clue. And if the parent is not a tennis person, then the parent needs to ask the coach to have that conversation with the child. You know, please tell my child what it is you want him to have on his person when he shows up at the court.
Yeah,
so
and you know,
that's
a tournament, and I see a mom carrying the kid's bag.
No, red flag
I am
all over the place.
And I don't care if it's a novice tournament. I'm all over that kid. I'm like, hey, kid, come here for a second. Aren't you a player?
Right.
You know? And then look,
red flag.
Mom and Dad are on vacation. This is their vacation. You're playing. Go get that bag from your mom right now.
Right.
Know?
Red flag. Red flag.
Yeah. Don't make your bag. That means you're not a player.
Right.
Okay, so
and not just the bag, the water bottle, everything. I mean,
all that stuff.
You know,
okay,
everything.
So that's terrific, and I concur with that wholeheartedly. So now, what are some other things as they get a little bit older and more responsible? Then you kind of delegate more responsibility to them.
Match warm-ups during tournaments. Arranging their warm-up. So if the coach is not taking them, if you, the parent, are taking them and you're not of the ability to be your child's warm-up partner, then your child needs to make arrangements to warm up. And it's not mom's responsibility or dad's responsibility to make those arrangements. Once they're in, you know, maybe 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade, these kids all have the ability through smartphones or iPads or whatever to connect with their tennis buddies, and they need to learn how to do that. And you can facilitate that at first as the parent. You know, you can talk them through the process, but toward the end of middle school, they definitely need to be the one that's arranging those warm-ups.
Yeah, I had Joel Drucker on my show, and he was talking about how he'll hit with any junior that wants to hit, but they have to call him. He doesn't accept phone calls from parents.
Right.
So,
right.
And part of what I'm hoping happens here in this, as people listen to this, is that they learn to recognize maybe their own helicopter parenting, and fly at a higher altitude, or over there, make the drop off and then head back to home base.
Exactly.
So, yeah, and I don't know. It's what is it about this modern age that has parents wanting to manage these things and even micromanage their kids? What do you think?
Oh gosh,
what motivates that?
We don't have enough time for that.
Okay,
we don't have enough time on the air today for that.
Stay busy. Hey, Mom, don't you have something else you could be doing right now?
No, I'm just saying you and I don't have enough time on the air to have that conversation today. That's a separate show.
Okay. I think it runs that deep. Maybe we need to have a micromanaging show.
Well, we could do that. I would be a good one to have on because I was terrible at that for a really, really long time, longer than I'd care to admit.
Well, and so the fact that you can, I think, is going to be helpful and instructive to a lot of parents who are earlier on to be able to hear someone of your stature, admitting that. I think that's very helpful. So I appreciate your candor and your humility to admit that. So, all right, now, what were some of the? Well, okay, I think we might still have some more questions for what kind of questions do you ask coaches as the players then really begin to excel and they're getting closer to that, 16, 17, where they're about to be recruited and, they should be playing, high-level sectional or national events. How does that change the questions?
Well, and don't forget about high school tennis in there too. And so that's a question. I want to know what the coach's philosophy is on the importance of playing high school tennis. I want to know, and really, I guess I should have mentioned this one earlier, is this a coach that's going to push homeschooling on my family? I want to know that. And I need to reconcile my feelings about homeschooling with that of the coach and make sure we're in agreement there. And I'm not going to say, one way's right and another way's wrong. I'm just going to say I think it's important for the coach and the family to be on the same page with that. So,
that brings up a great point. Let me interject for a second. That brings up a great point because whenever you hear these absolute statements of you have to do this or that won't happen, then I dismiss that almost immediately because there's so many different ways to approach an alternative educational structure so as to permit more training time. So there is not one way.
Right. Agreed. But again, I think it's everybody has to be on the same page with it. So I want to know, is the coach going to be supportive if my child wants to play for his high school team? And depending on what part of the country you're in, high school tennis could be a really high level or it could be not so great. So I think, having that conversation is important. I also, if college tennis is the pathway the child is on, I want to know how the coach is going to be involved in that process. Are they going to make phone calls on my child's behalf? Are they going to invite coaches to come out to drills and see my kid hit? Are they going to introduce me to various coaches? Or, are they going to, as happened with my child, are they going to allow my child to be in full control of the process and use this as a learning and growth experience for the rest of his life? And I have to say, the way my son went through the recruiting process, I would recommend for every single family out there. It has been unbelievable for him, and the skills he's gained as a result will serve him the rest of his life.
Yeah. Let me throw another thing in there also. I think you also want to find discrete ways to find out how ego involved is the coach in the outcome of the player, because I think that can be a little bit of a danger sign. I have a kind of an interesting story. There was a kid that I was coaching that had a nice two-handed backhand, but it seemed to me that his volleys were so good he could be a good net player if he learned to hit a one-handed backhand, and it was going to help his net game even more. He's going to come to the net. So I pestered him about that for a couple of months, and then gave up on it. And then about 6 weeks later, all of a sudden he comes and he's hitting nothing but 100 backhands. And so I said, "Wow, that's great. I'm glad you finally listened to me." And he looked at me kind of strangely, like, "What are you talking about?" You know, he's like, I just decided I was going to hit a one-hander. And I'm like, "Okay, great, good for you."
Right.
Okay, so his net game begins to improve. And then I was like, you know what? I mean, you're moving so well at the net. I think you could at times be a full-time serve and volleyer, you know, and at least serve and volley sometimes. You know, hounded him about that for a couple of weeks, gave up. The week before sectional playoffs in high school, he says to me, "Coach, I want to be a full-time serve and volleyer." I was like, "Wow, I'm glad you finally listened to me." And same look on his face. And I was like, "You know what? Bless you, son, because that is a great idea you have." And so I guess all of that underlines, does the coach allow the kid to make that decision? I mean, it goes back to what you were just saying, you know. Does the kid get to be the decision maker? And so I laugh because it violates my ego to not have been, quote, listened to, although in my heart of hearts I know that I influenced him. But I mean, I just thought it's humorous, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So, and I imagine that your kid probably has similar qualities to that. I mean, just from what a little I've heard of, you know, about him and his, you know, his personality and all that, I bet he's had experiences sort of similarly. So, all right, now, what were some of the struggles that came along during the junior years, or have happened? What were some of the adversities that had to be faced?
The biggest issue early on was size. My son was small for his age. My husband and I are not big people. He did not get good height genes from us. So in the 12s and in the 14s and really even into the beginning of the 16s, his small size was a big obstacle to overcome. And he thankfully is very quick as a mover, and so that was a great compensation for him. You know, his speed, I mean, kind of like a David Ferrer type mover. You know, he's not the biggest, strongest guy out there, but he's going to get to every ball. So he learned to use that more and more to his advantage. So that was one of the things he struggled with. Another thing that is still at age 18 is still a challenge for him is dealing with cheaters. And we got some very bad advice early in the process about how my son should respond to a cheating opponent. And it took a long time for my son to learn how to manage his response when he got a bad call or a series of bad calls.
Can you share or at least allude to the bad advice?
The bad advice was, you know, how dare somebody cheat you, and if they make 2 or more bad calls, then you take the point back. You make a bad call right back and take the point back, which went 100% against my son's comfort, 100% against my husband's and my personal ethics and family ethics. But that's what a coach was telling him to do. And, you know, while we had our ethics, part of that ethic was you listen to your coach. You know, you follow your coach. I mean, that's what the coach is there for. So it was a real dilemma. And what was happening was that, you know, he was allowing those situations to totally take over his ability to play tennis. I mean, he would get so mental on the court that he wasn't able to focus on the job at hand. And
yeah, you know Yeah, let me share a little insight there. As a tournament director, you see things globally, and I've run well over 30 tournaments. And when I share these statistics, generally people say I'm pretty close. But I think bad calls are misunderstood because, from my experience, 80% of the bad calls that happen are because it's hard, and the ball's going fast that way, and you turned your head suddenly, and the ball was a blur, and in a moment of bad judgment, you called it out. Oops, it was a mistake, right?
And that's the message that I wish my son and we as his parents had heard from the get-go. That the majority of the time it's not... Sorry?
I was going to finish my 100%, and then I'll let you comment.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So, and then 15% of the bad calls are because kids want to win so bad that they're psychologically blinded and they sincerely make a mistake because they really thought it was out because they want to win so badly. I was that kid. I was the kid that would make a mistake because I wanted to win so bad. My eyes told me it was out. So, and then 5% of the calls are just plain criminal because the coach taught the kids to cheat. Because on break point, when the ball's on the line, you call it out because that's how you win. And that's just awful. Those calls are the ones that are ruining the game.
Yes.
But I'm not pissed about it. Okay, so now...
I am. As a parent, I am. I hate it. I hate it, and I hate that it goes unpunished. But that's a whole other discussion, too.
Yeah. So, okay, but then... and then one thing I think what might be good, tell me what you think about this or how you might adjust it, okay? Your kid sees one bad call, okay, fine, anybody can make a bad call. Give them the confused dog look, Hey, what? Second one, are you sure? Which translated means, I think you're cheating me. I think everybody knows are you sure means, I think you're cheating. And then number 3, lines person, period. You need help. No, do
that
not
can come back to bite
you.
A
second time. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, but the lines person can come back to bite the player. So that's not always the right solution either.
How can that be? How can the lines person come back to bite the player?
Well, let me give you one example. At a very high-level sectional event, a player photographed the lines person asleep in the chair during the match. You laugh, but you put yourself put yourself in the shoe of the player who's worked their tail off to qualify to play this event. Put yourself in the shoes of the parents who have spent probably close to $1,000 to be at the tournament and have taken time away from other obligations to be there. It's not okay, and it happens too often.
Well, and you know that was John McEnroe's big problem at Wimbledon was that he would. He said there'd be a bad call, and he would see that the umpire had been nodding off and had suddenly sprung back to being awake in order to make the call. It is. It's maddening. Now, I'm not going to say that taking their picture while they're asleep is a smart idea, but I could see how that might be a problem. But I mean, if you go and you complain, hey, this lines person isn't really paying attention, somebody needs to listen to that. The people who say we're listening should listen to that because that's a pretty strong customer service issue,
Yes, it is.
I mean, if you just look at tournaments as a business, right, and the people who are signing up for the tournaments are the customer, and you want to provide great customer service, then you make sure you don't have lines people who are falling asleep. You make sure you don't have umpires who walk around and do nothing. I've seen that so many times. It's just unbelievable. It's like, why are these people being paid? You know, they walked right past a court where a kid flung his racket and hit the fence, and it hit me in the back through the fence, and nothing, and the umpire standing right there. So
right.
I don't get that part. I mean, where's
yeah.
the customer service? I mean, if you have those lines people and those umpires there, should they not be working?
It's a big problem. It is a big problem. So, but we're off topic because what we're really talking about is teaching the child the appropriate way to respond when he or she feels like the opponent is making bad calls on purpose. And I wish that my child had been taught a different way. I wish I had been taught a different way as the parent. It would have saved all of us a lot of angst over the years. So that's one of my big lessons learned.
Yeah, and I think the long view of it as well is that the kids who win by cheating will be exposed at some point, and they won't succeed at the highest levels when they can't do that anymore.
Right. It's reflected in their recruiting efforts. I mean, the reputation follows the child. So college coaches hear about those things.
Yeah, I've seen professional players where the ball is on the line and it's been called in, and I can see the player secretly wishing they could call that ball out.
Sure.
But they can't, and now they lose.
Sure.
So think about the negative. Think about how hard it is to recover from a lifetime of cheating. That's got to be really tough to go and have been built your game on something other than principle, and now you have to establish that when you're 17, 18. Mm-hmm. That's a tough transition. All right, now, okay, so let's see. When you came up on things that were sort of mysterious to you, what were some of the things that as you went through you were like, wow, I don't know the answer. You had an interesting problem in training or in tournaments, and you wish you had answers available.
My biggest concern, that frustrated me, to a point where I just was like, oh my God, this sport drives me insane, is navigating the junior tournament structure and figuring out which tournaments to play and how to balance point chasing with the development of my child as a player and which rankings we need to be relying on and all of those types of aspects of the game. And, again, it was one of those things that, I would reach out to USTA and I just didn't get satisfactory answers. My child's coaches, I maybe till pretty recently didn't help with that. I'm not sure they help with it still. I think now my son really relies on his peers to figure out which tournaments to play. That they talk and work through the numbers and figure it out together. But when it was my job to kind of go through all of that, I just was terribly frustrated. And this has been one of my things. Is there
now a resource for that, or can one be created?
ParentingAces.
Okay. So,
but the problem is the rules change, and the structure continues to change. And so just when you think you have it figured out, new rules come into play, new point tables come into play, new types of tournaments come into play, and so it's just a big mess. And I wish there were a simplified flow chart that we as parents could follow to figure out, okay, my kid's just starting out. And granted, there is to some extent, I mean, USTA does level its tournaments, there are entry-level tournaments and, intermediate and advanced and things like that. But the problem is each section calls the tournament something different. So if you're traveling to visit grandma in another section and your child wants to play a tournament while they're there so grandma and grandpa can come watch, you may go on to the USTA tournament page on Tennis Link and not have a clue which tournament is appropriate for your child to play, because the tournaments are called by different levels than what you're used to in your section. So it's just very complicated.
On the other hand, I can see how, because the demographics and the distribution of players at different levels, is different in every section, that could be a ready explanation for that. And part of it's just marketing. It's words people understand and words that appeal to people in different regions. So, I don't know that that's something that's going to be solved. But on the other hand, the fact that Parenting Aces is there as an ongoing resource to help interpret the new tax laws that come in every year, that's really what it is. And it's funny. I briefly spent time on a committee and tried to fight the ever increasing amount of rules coming into the game, in favor of, hey, why don't we actually focus on player development? But and then when I left that committee, then also the amount of alcohol consumption that I was experiencing dropped dramatically. So there's benefits to resigning things. Okay, yeah. So that's a good one, and so let's underline that people should get on. If you're a parent listening or a coach, you should get on to Parenting Aces and check in with it. And I've seen Lisa share new changes, rumors of new changes, surveys about new changes, deciding whether or not to try to fight them or not, or accept, and all that. I think it's a great way to keep abreast of what's coming up, what might come up, and what has gone into effect. So that's a great resource. So thank you for that. All right, now why don't we go back to your parenting, and let's talk about some of the core principles of character development that you've always had in mind for your kids, not just your tennis playing kids, but what are some of the things that you want to build into your kids in general, especially through sports and other extracurricular activities?
First and foremost, independence. The goal, I think, for most of us as parents is to raise children who can function independently in the world. So, that goes back to what I said about making sure your child takes responsibility for his or her tennis, in terms of making sure they have everything in their bag, and, that they're doing the things they're supposed to do to make sure that they have a warm-up before a tournament match, and those types of things. So independence is key for me. Also, fighting for what's right. That's a big one for us in our family. And my husband's an attorney. He's a litigator. This is what he does for a living, fight for what's right and fight for justice. And it's just kind of a mindset that I think permeates our family. And I think tennis is a great vehicle for teaching that. Work ethic. Working hard for something that is important to you is kind of at the core of what we try to instill in our children. And, we've been pretty successful, I would have to say. I have two daughters who are college graduates and who are both excelled academically. My oldest is pursuing an acting career and, has committed herself to that and working toward that goal. My middle child is a horse kid and is trying, she just recently graduated college, so she's trying to figure out how to devise a career for herself that will allow her to spend time with her horse friends and in that world. So
actually a horse herself, right?
I'm sorry?
She's not actually a horse herself, right?
but I would say that she considers horses her friends. she has human friends as well.
Does she watch, what's that show, Heartland? Does she watch Heartland?
I have no idea.
Oh, it's not.
She hasn't
lived
at home in a long time, so.
It's a Canadian show, and at the center of it is this horse ranch, and a young star of the show is a horse whisperer type. So, yeah, it's a family favorite.
Okay,
but,
well that would definitely be up her alley. But and then for my son, it's been striving toward college tennis and playing Division I. I mean, he has been committed toward that goal. Since, like I mentioned, since he was 9 years old. So, I think I'm patting myself on the back a little bit right now, but I think we've done a pretty good job in instilling that work ethic into our children. And, and being kind. I mean, being kind is huge.
Well, that's the only one that you repeated twice, and let's hope that the kindness is the thing that overrides all of that. But okay, so those are admirable traits, and so look, I mean, for a family that might be all their kids play tennis, but they're all different. When you're a parent, you realize that a lot of this is actually outside of your control, and that your kids are actually wired, and they're wired differently than you might have thought or expected, differently than ourselves. So what is it about your kids' wiring that makes them so unique, even though you have these character development ideals in mind?
My particular kids?
Yeah, your kids, because I think it's important. This is again like the reason for the question is to sort of help defeat the cookie cutter mentality.
Okay. Well, my kids couldn't be more different, so I'll start with that. My oldest, who's 25, she will tell you that school was her sport. She competed as hard academically as my son competes on the tennis court. And one of her goals was to get a perfect score on the SAT, and she accomplished that. So,
wow.
So that's her. She's driven, okay? She is a huge personality in a little body. She's 5'2", maybe, with her shoes on. But I promise you when she's in the vicinity. She makes herself known. She's just a huge personality. So that's my first child. My second child is the rebel. She fits the middle child description almost to a T. She accomplished incredible things academically, and always took care of business when it came to school, went to college on a scholarship, both of them did, on academic scholarship. And yet on an interpersonal level with me, we butt heads like crazy. We love each other, but we butt heads like crazy. So that's that. And she's my horse lover. I was never an animal person. I have learned to understand people who love animals, but that's not me. So she's been a challenge for me because we're so alike in so many ways, yet so different in so many ways. So that's my second one, who's 23 years old. And then my son, who's 18, is not really sure how to describe him. I'm still figuring him out. And it's one of the things I wrote about in my latest article announcing his college commitment, the things that I'm continuing to learn about him as a person just kind of blow my mind. But he is fiercely loyal, sometimes to a fault. He is 100% about fairness and justice, and will, stand up for those who he feels are being treated unfairly or unjustly. And while he is extremely bright, intelligent, school is really not a priority for him. And so he does what he needs to do to get by academically, but it's just not a big factor in his day. So that's a bit of, that was always a bit of a challenge for me. And actually, it was my oldest daughter who finally said to me, because she tutors high school kids. That's how she pays her rent while she's pursuing her acting career. And she did say to me at one point, "Mom, you have to be okay with B's. You just have to. He's not going to be an A student. That's not who he is." So that was really good advice that she gave me, and it helped me let go of my expectation on that front a little bit. Because all it was doing was causing headache.
Well, okay, and so right there you have the achievement of a goal right there, where your kid has become an adult, and they tell you the honest truth, and they trust you enough to know that you'll listen to them.
Yes.
And
sure.
There's a lot to be said for that right there. I mean, ultimately, all of this whole conversation really is about having a voice.
True.
And so, I mean, that's part of what it's all about, is that, everything we do is going to be better when every engaged person who's a stakeholder has a voice in how it turns out. So, okay, that was deep. We're going to have to come up to a higher, closer to the surface here now.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that trip to L.A., and that was kind of like a pivotal moment, and there were a lot of great stories. In fact, I loved that blog post that you did that was pretty lengthy about the catalog of the entire trip to L.A., including meeting LMFAO. I don't even know how to say that.
Yeah, that's good. Red Foo is who we met, but yes.
Yeah, Red Foo. And, obviously those guys are borderline ridiculous. And wasn't he dating Azarenka?
Yes, he was.
That's craziness. So I'm thinking, is that a wig?
No, that is his actual hair.
Okay, that was my big question from that. Okay, we don't have to hear about the trip.
Okay.
No, tell us a little bit about the trip, and then if somebody wants to read about it, where can they find that? What was the date on that? Do you know?
Oh God, no, I don't know. It
It
was last February. February 2014, so if somebody wants to look through the February archives on ParentingAces.com, they'll find it. But
I think you did. But give us a couple of highlights from that.
Well, I think the first highlight was the time that my son spent on court with Craig Signorelli. And people that follow me on Facebook and Twitter and through the blog and stuff understand my adoration for Craig and all that I feel like we owe him in terms of where my son is today versus where he was a year ago. Craig is one of the teaching pros at the Malibu Racquet Club in Malibu, California, which is situated overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Larry Ellison owns the club. It's one of the most beautiful tennis spots I've been to. And Craig's approach to coaching is different from any that we had ever experienced. And it's not to say that he's the only one doing what he does, the only one we had ever come across. and still is the only one we've ever come across. So having the opportunity to sit court and watch and listen to Craig working with my son was absolutely incredible. And Craig got my son to think about the game of tennis in a completely different way. And it really changed the way he trained once he got home. It changed the way he competed in tournaments. I mean, it really had a profound impact on him. So that, I have to say, was the highlight of that first trip in February. Not to mention getting to hit on the courts of the LA Tennis Center on the UCLA campus and being a lesson partner for Red Foo, which was just crazy, and Victoria Azarenka coming up and sitting courtside watching Red Foo have his lesson, and me sitting on the bench next to her, and I was just completely starstruck. So that was pretty awesome. And that trip it really was a turning point for my son. I mean, he spent a lot of time talking with the players at both UCLA and Pepperdine, because Pepperdine University is very close to the Malibu Racquet Club, and a lot of those guys train at the Malibu Racquet Club in their off time. So my son got to meet several of them, got to hit with several of them, and has since developed friendships with a lot of the guys from UCLA and Pepperdine. And it really kind of opened his mind to what possibilities were out there in terms of college tennis for him. And so that was a huge turning point. And, being in LA in February, leaving rain and cold and dreariness of Atlanta to go to sunshine and beach and Malibu, for God's sakes, I mean, that was pretty impactful as well. So, that whole trip really opened up a whole new world for him. He went back to LA for his spring break in April alone, and again spent time at the LA Tennis Center. He actually went out to lunch with Red Foo after they had a practice match, and they hung out together. And I mean, I can't even tell you, there have been so many incredible aspects of the time he spent out there. A lot of
wait a second.
tennis.
So Red Foo's legit, huh? He's a real player?
Yeah, I mean, he plays in, some entry-level professional events. I mean, he's
really?
training to play. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see his name in the
casual. No, my perception was he had casual interest in the game and he was just hanging around. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. No, he's out there, and I mean, he works hard on the court, and he's very generous with his time, and so that was a cool experience. And it really changed my son's whole mindset toward how he was working on and off the court, what he really wanted for his college tennis career, and what he was willing to do to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that's pivotal. That's awesome, and the fact that he went out on his own, that's pretty cool too. I mean, because moms worry when the kid leaves on his own. So now Craig is definitely awesome and is one of the great collaborative coaches. Who are some of the other coaches that you've run into who you would say they're great for the game? They bring people together. They are open-minded to hearing ideas from anyone and sharing ideas with anyone. And so can you name a few of those that you've encountered?
Well, let me just preface this list by saying my encounters have been either through interviewing them for the Parenting Aces radio show, or for an article on the website, or I may have met them briefly in my travels. So they aren't people that...
Be generous.
Huh?
So, yeah, I mean, that's good. That's a good qualification. So, ready?
Well,
I'm ready for your list.
I just want to make it clear that these are not people that my kid has worked with. So I don't have direct experience, watching my kid on the court with them. So I will say Tim Mayotte, I think, is unbelievable. I love his approach to tennis and working with juniors. I think he's got a very sane approach and a very collaborative approach, so I like him a lot. Lester Cook, who works with Craig Signorelli, has worked a lot on court with my son, and I think Lester's still learning. He's young, but I think he is headed in that direction to be one of those collaborative people. I think, let me think. Nick Saviano, I love his approach to working with juniors. His philosophy is the kid always comes first, always. And, I'm here to serve what's in the best interest of the child. And so I love that about him. Who else? I see, and now you're putting me on the spot, and I'm going to leave people off, and I'm going to have people mad at me.
Yeah, then you're going to feel bad, and people are going to call in and complain on your show. And it's going to be
I'm going to get all sorts of nasty emails.
I can't believe you forgot about me.
But there are...
No, I don't think we need to go too deeply into it. But,
okay.
It's a good question, I think, let's consider the rest of it rhetorical, because you probably have a list of close to 100 people. And
for sure.
The people who've been on your show, I mean, it's almost a requirement that they have to be collaborative for them to take the time to do that. So everybody who's been on the Parenting Aces show is collaborative.
Yeah.
We don't allow people on the show who aren't collaborative.
Well, it's not that we don't allow them. It's that the people who aren't collaborative don't say yes when I invite them.
Oh, okay. All right. No, I get it. I'm putting words in your mouth from my own twisted mind. So good. You called me on it. Don't let me do that. All right.
Okay.
You know what's interesting to me is that the people who say we're listening and who say we want to engage, I've given those people multiple invitations to come talk to me, and I don't even get an email back.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I say anybody who says they're listening and they're collaborative, like there's going to be this big webinar next week, and they asked me the question, what advice would you give? And I said this. I said, when you engage, really truly engage, right?
Yeah.
And when you come up with, and from the discussion, come up with action items, and then do them. Do you think that's good advice?
Be accountable.
Do them, yeah. Really engage, come up with action items, and then do them, right?
Yeah.
So and if that happens, I mean, I'm excited for what can happen on this.
Me too.
What can happen on this webinar coming up? Are you going to be on that?
Yeah, I am, and but I'm just going to be listening. I'm not sending anything in ahead of time. I just am going to be there to listen, and I was on the first one as well, and I got to give USTA credit. I think they are trying to do a better job at engaging their customers, and the customers are us, the tennis players, right? So I think they are doing. They're making the effort. They're on the right track. They're not there yet. I mean, they certainly are not there yet. But I give them a lot of credit for recognizing that a change needed to occur and for starting the wheels turning to make those changes happen. So. Yeah.
Well, in the last couple of days, I've reached out to Katrina Adams, and I would love to have her on my show. I would definitely love to hear her on your show. And, I'm hopeful that because of the kind of person she is and the organization she's been involved with, that I think she's going to be very, very good for the USTA. So
I agree.
So, so fingers crossed. And so there it is. There's the open invitation. And so, Katrina, if you're listening, which you should be right now, I hope you are, all right, then we'll get you on the show soon. All right, now, final words, because I got to wrap up and get out of here. And I want to let you know that this is the second ever show that have had that's gone an hour and a half, and the other one was Torben Ulrich.
Wow, I'm in good company.
So, I mean, your kid's not even a drummer for Metallica, and you got to be on for an hour and a half. So now,
okay, but Bill, to be fair, he has drummed with Mike and Wayne Bryan.
Okay, that's awesome. Let's be fair if we have to. So now let's put a bow on this thing. What are some takeaways? Give me 2 or 3 or maybe 4 takeaways that you want to hammer home for and put a bow on.
Okay, well, okay. Number 1, to the coaches that are listening, communication is key. Communication with the player, communication with the parents, keeping the lines of communication open, being clear about what you expect, and listening and clarifying what the parents expect and what the player expects. So that's huge. For the parents, making sure that you allow your child to learn the gifts that tennis has to teach. Don't hover, don't take over, don't micromanage. Step back, allow your child to fail from time to time, be there to pick up the pieces, but please allow them to experience and learn from this game, because it has some incredible lessons to give. And for the kids, I just want to say, if things get tough and you get frustrated and you're going through a period where you're not winning or you're injured or you're just not enjoying the game, hang in there. There are ups and downs of this game, and they continue to ebb and flow through the whole junior tennis development process. And my son is a prime example of a kid who hung in there through a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of downs especially, and now he's getting to go play college tennis at his dream school. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I encourage the kids to just hang in there. Find somebody you can talk to. Find a mentor that you can confide in when things are difficult or challenging, but hang in there.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show, and it's always nice to get to know you a little bit better.
Well, same here, Bill, and thank you for doing my show this week. And anytime you need a parent to come give a point of view, you know who to call.
Oh, final question, though. Is Parenting Aces going to continue?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It may take on a little bit different tone as my kid leaves juniors and enters the world of college tennis. But, yeah, I'm actually seeking somebody that's got like a 10, 11, 12-year-old junior playing tennis that might want to help me cover the junior side now that my son's transitioning out. So if anybody listening has some secret writing skills and wants to get involved, please contact me, because I'm looking for somebody to continue that aspect of the site as well.
All right, very good. So have a great day, and thanks everybody for listening. Take care, Lisa.
Thanks, Bill. You too.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. So thanks to Lisa for coming on. And, just wanted to remind you that I wrote a book called Playing Sports Right Your Way, and it has a lot to do with empowering kids to be decision makers and take on that mantle of independence. So parents, you might want to look at it. It actually has a little note for you in there as well, which tells you that I'm not trying to turn your kid into a monster. But Playing Sports Right Your Way, it's on Amazon, and it has a number of 5-star reviews, including one from Linda LeClaire, who's a mental sports guru to a lot of college programs. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening, and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.